I have seen humans choose a lot of bravery and a lot of loyalty, and they may not have always been appreciated and may have not always been talked about in all of the history books, mostly written by conquerors, but they exist and they exist today. From revolutionaries in Haiti that decided they will not be enslaved anymore, to folks in every single corner of the world who are not choosing mediocrity and they're not choosing convenience. And that is really our only hope.
You're listening to Dignity and Joy, a podcast from FoodShare. On the pod, we confront the systems of oppression that impact who has access to food and the land it's grown on and who doesn't. Achieving something better will take hard work from all of us and can only be done if we listen closely to the people who are already leading change in the way we think about food. FoodShare's Sheldomar Elliott delves into the connections between food and justice with folks who have their fingers on the pulse and their hands in the soil. Together, they dream in color and consider what it would take to build a just and hopeful city. A city where everyone can feed themselves, their loved ones, and their community with dignity and with joy.
Hi, I'm Sheldomar, and welcome to this episode of Dignity and Joy, a podcast from FoodShare. Today, our guest is Vivien Sansour. Vivien is an artist, storyteller, researcher, and conservationist. She uses image, sketch, film, soil, seeds, and plants to enliven old cultural tales in contemporary presentations and to advocate for the protection of biodiversity as a cultural and political act. Vivien is the founder of Palestine Heirloom Seed Library and works with a global network of farmers and seed advocates to promote seed conservation and agrobiodiversity. An avid lover of nature and the arts, Vivien has sprouted many projects out of the seed library, including co-founding albatn, Arts and Seed Studio in Bethlehem, and the Traveling Kitchen Project. A culinary historian, enthusiastic cook, and columnist, Vivien has aimed to bring threatening varieties, quote, back to the dinner table to become part of our living culture rather than a relic of the past. This has led to collaborations with Dan Saladino from the BBC Food Program and chefs like Anthony Bourdain, Sami Tamimi, and Tara Wigley. While born in Jerusalem, Vivien was raised in both Beijing in Palestine and in the U.S. She is a former Harvard Fellow and currently teaching in the Experimental Humanities Department at Bard College. She is also writing an autobiography that weaves together the stories of seeds with her own personal experiences in Palestine and abroad. Welcome, Vivien, and thanks for taking the time to be here today.
Thank you for having me.
Wonderful. Well, before we get into it, I want to start by acknowledging that I'm here in Toronto, sacred land that is the traditional territories of the Wendat, Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Mississaugas of the Credit, and that this territory is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt covenants. At FoodShare, we think it's important to start any conversation on this land by recognizing the many nations of Indigenous peoples who presently live on this land, those who have spent time here, and the ancestors who have hunted and gathered on this land. I also want to acknowledge the many people of African descent who are not settlers, but whose ancestors were forcibly displaced as part of the transatlantic slave trade, brought against their will, and made to work on these lands. At FoodShare, we believe that advancing Indigenous sovereignty is deeply and inextricably linked to Black liberation, and we remain committed to advancing both. We often try to reflect on our land acknowledgement and consider the connections between the words we are saying and the material we're working with on any given day, as well as the meaningful action we can take. Well, Vivien, considering that this is your first time on the podcast, what we often do at the beginning is start off with a few icebreakers. How do you feel about that?
I am curious.
Okay, well, let's try them out and we'll see how they go. So the first question I got for you, and they're sort of like rapid style kind of questions. First one here is, what are you looking forward to growing coming this spring season? Because I know that you like to grow.
Oof. I am looking forward to growing a stronger heart muscle.
I wasn't expecting that. That's a great one. Beautiful. And another one here is, what song do you have on repeat right now? Or maybe one that you're going back to?
Oh my God. A few, but It's a funny one. It's by Jack Ure,
Okay.
a Jamaican artist, and it's called Unconditional Love.
I got to check that one out. Next one is, what would your friends say is your superpower? If they had to describe that.
Wow, that's a hard one, man. I mean, you should ask them.
I would if I could.
What my friends would say is my superpower. Well, I had a friend recently tell me that she feels when she talks to me that as if I have died and come back from the dead to tell
Mm.
some stories of unseen places. So I don't know if that's a superpower, but I guess it might be.
Yeah, that's special. Like some clairvoyance, some wisdom there. Yeah, I like it. I like it. I got a couple more here. Is there a board game or a card game that you're competitive at, or like sort of win often with?
I am awful. I'm super competitive when it comes to board games, which is like weird. Like another personality comes out.
Mm.
Um, but pretty much in all of them, I'm like this. I'm awful to play with. Unless you like banter and you want to get like uh, mean. But I love to play uh, a board game. It has to be a board game. I like to play dominoes.
Okay. Yeah, that's a great one.
I'm not very nice.
I'll keep that in mind. Last one I got here. What is a TV show or movie that you haven't watched but you've been meaning to, or is like on your list?
Yes, there's a movie called A House in Jerusalem by actually a friend of mine. His name is Muayyad Alayyan.
Hmm.
And I have been dying to see it. And literally every time I've had the chance to see it in a festival or something, I missed it. So I would really like to see it, even though I'm sure it's gonna destroy me. But I think it's probably a brilliant film.
Yeah, I believe it. I hope you get some time soon to watch that. Well, there's lots that I want to talk to you about today, Vivien,
Wait a
but
minute, this icebreaker game is not fair. Like you get to ask me icebreaker questions.
oh wow, the tables have been turned.
Uh-oh.
Well, I'll give you that power then. What questions might you have for me?
I mean, I'm just curious, what board game would you play?
It's funny. I'm a big gamer, not typically board games, like a video game kind of person.
Mhm.
Um, I can be competitive, but I just like having fun rather than like trying to win. Um, s- Trying to think what was a recent one. Have you heard of this game Risk?
Yes.
Yeah, so I played Risk. It was like a Game of Thrones edition, so it was kind of cool. That was a lot of fun. I liked that. But I'm a really big nerd, and I actually like trading card games. So I play this game called Magic the Gathering. Not surprised if you haven't heard of it.
No clue.
Okay, don't worry, you're not missing too much. But that's a game I'm really into, and I've been playing it since I was like 12, 11 years old. So I try to meet up with friends every couple of weeks to continue playing that.
Serious. Well, thank you.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Anything else
No,
you would like to know?
I'm good. I'm sorry.
I like the questions back at me, so yeah, feel free to do that throughout the conversation. Um, well, I'm thinking, yeah, like before we get into some of your work and what you're up to currently, I thought it'd be really nice to learn a bit more about yourself and perhaps your upbringing. So yeah, if you could speak a bit to that, and eventually, I feel like it'll get us into the work that you're currently doing today.
Sure. Like I get asked this question a lot, and it's hard to know like what dimension of my upbringing. I think we all have uh, stories about our upbringing, and often as we grow, they shift and change. But but for sure, like in the material sense, I, as you mentioned in the introduction, I was born in Jerusalem. I um, had a very, in a way, typical Palestinian small town village upbringing. I was um, a very mischievous child, but I was also like a curious child who pretty much, spent most of my time outside, playing outside with the neighbors' kids, with my cousins, climbing trees, exploring mud, figuring out what grasses to eat, what grasses not to touch, falling on my face. And yeah, and I grew up in a community, in a very solid community where my idea of food, for example, was something that was always shared. There was no concept of food being a commodity or something that you have to have money to have. And not because everybody was rich, but because there was a sense of abundance, in the sense that, we even say in Palestine, although now, of course, this saying has been like invading my brain a lot, because for hundreds and hundreds of years we always said nobody goes to sleep hungry, and what that means was always that we will always take care of each other. And so it wasn't until I came to the United States that I realized that people ask permission to eat an apple when they're in your house. And like, can I have your apple? Or like, is this your bread? And that was quite a cultural adjustment for me, especially still is even sometimes now. And kind of, I know my friends, my American friends, for them, from their perspective, they're being polite. But from my perspective, they're being offensive, because what do you mean? Like, it's food. It's for us. If you're in my home, you're my, like, if you wanted to borrow my sweater, that's a different conversation. You should ask. But to eat, it's almost like uh, it's almost like a commentary on my generosity, which, culturally speaking, it, it becomes offensive. Of course, I'm not offended now because I understand the context of it. But yeah, food was always something that was shared, and we didn't have to have every kind of food to have every kind of food, because we had a lot. I grew up in mostly agricultural terrain, with like people having small home gardens, and that's how people kind of survived, with apple trees, apricot trees in particular. My village is famous for its apricots, a unique kind of apricot, and grapes, and pomegranates, and all kinds of other nut fruits, which made it possible to, for example, eat pomegranate even if you didn't have a pomegranate tree, because we have a tradition of sending baskets to each other. Um, like, we have a lot of figs, so we send figs to our neighbors. So our neighbors send back the basket. They send the basket back full of whatever they have. Maybe they have pomegranates. I say that because literally our neighbors had a lot of pomegranates and we didn't. We had one pomegranate tree, and I was always excited when they send us back the basket, because it meant we didn't have pomegranates. So that's a little bit about my upbringing. Very little television. I think we watched television only on Fridays in the morning, cartoon, and we had two channels. And yeah.
Yeah, I know that's. Thank you for sharing all that. I also love pomegranates, so there's something that we have in common there. And I'm thinking then, just to sort of like fast forward into the now, like what brought you to the U.S.? And I believe you're in New York. Is that correct?
I'm in upstate.
Okay.
Well, I mean, what brought me to the US is the same reason that many people um, in my shoes came to the US. Some could say by choice, but really, is it?
Mm,
I mean, because what brought me to the US is the US, meaning it's the policies of the US that has destroyed this world I just described to you.
right.
My pomegranates and my trees and that world that I just described to you is, as we speak, being destroyed and has been under attack for so many years by policies of this country, which has before destroyed also the beautiful world of the people of this land. So I am another really victim of this system that has been and continues to destroy our worlds, and then tries to sell us its world
Mm,
in these packages that we consume. So I'm also a consumer. So I am here because, like many of us in this world, trying to survive and find little safe nooks and crannies to live in the pretense of safety.
yeah, that's I feel that, and then that's very real. Makes me think about my family coming from Jamaica. Um, of course, not the same, but there's some similarities there. And I'm also just trying to find some safety and some care amidst this gigantic system of oppression. So, yeah, there's a lot there that we can dive into, and perhaps we can use food as a sort of way to expand on that, because I know that you started the Palestine Heirloom Seed Library. Perhaps you can speak to what that is and what does it do.
Sure. Well, yeah, the Palestine Heirloom Seed Library came out of a lot of longing for that world that was taken away from me, like was taken away from me, was taken away from my community. And I watched my people every day, new generations, be severed from that thing that made us who we are in a lot of ways, and our ability
Hmm.
to interact and be part of our natural terrains. And so we were being transformed into um, yeah, really into these subjects. Um, and it was kind of a rebellion against that, but also a kind of a return to love, like in a sense that, you return, you're taught that something is not worthy. It's not, you need to become more like Europeans, and you need to be more like Americans, and you need to wear suits, and you need to wear different clothes, and everything about you is primitive and shameful, and being a fallah or a peasant is shameful. You need to change your accent, you need to go to college. And so I, of course, drank the Kool-Aid like everybody, and I did that for a long time until I discovered that actually uh, who I am and where I come from is already not just good enough, but so much of value that the world, even the so-called sophisticated world, longs for and needs. And as my
Hmm.
mother always says, when people try to like shame us about, oh, you're from Beit Jala, you are fallahin, although today Beit Jala tries to be a city with, I mean, all these terraces have disappeared. And she would say, if anyone ever tells you that, remind them that country folk put food on the table for city folk. Like, we are the ones feeding
Mm,
uh, the people in the city. So They ain't got nothing on us.
That's real.
And so it was really a grief. It was a deep grief that I was going through, realizing that, wow, I've always had something so beautiful, so precious. Like, people here want to send their kids to nature camps. And, well, that was my childhood, you know? I didn't need to go to a nature camp. I grew up in nature as part of my life. It's not like something I go to also consume. And so I was in a PhD program in the US, and I decided, screw this. I don't want to learn from these books. I have elders and grandmas and grandpas I can go talk to. And so, in a way, I chose my own learning, like what works for me. This is not to say like some other people learn differently. And I just went and followed my joy, which was to sit with the elders and to learn. I wanted to learn about myself, and to learn more about, my people, because we were not allowed to learn about who we are in a healthy way. And so it started like this, and the more farmers I spoke to, the more conversations came about seeds, and particularly there's the famous story of the watermelon, where I had never heard of this watermelon. It's called jaddui, and I would talk to elders mostly in Jenin area in the north, and they would talk about the jaddui, and I'm like, who is jaddui? Like, who you keep calling this jaddui? And I want to know who that is. And it's a watermelon, and they talk about this watermelon, women. And I always tell the story because it was fascinating to me. Like, women would talk about giving birth while in the watermelon fields, hiding in the watermelon fields during the war. Uh, Men talk about shipping these watermelons with their fathers in trucks to Lebanon, to even Turkey. Like, so this watermelon, which also people talked about how delicious it was, and in fact, just recently, I didn't realize that also in the South, where I'm from, um, that they did that too, because I heard my mom talk to a friend of hers recently about how they also used to hide the watermelon under the bed, and it kept cool, so even by December they could still eat watermelon because it
Wow.
kept that long. And then I learned that this watermelon is part of the Ba'al seed system, which is a collection of seed varieties and varieties that grow with no irrigation. So they were developed like in a process of co-creation between human, non-human, the soil, the elements, the seeds itself, uh, to develop the intelligence to grow and to give fruit deep in the soil without any irrigation, just living off of the moisture retained in the soil from the rainy season, from the winter, and the
Mm.
dew. And of course, that meant that, there's a whole system of knowledge around how do you prep the soil for that. What do you also grow next to it? When do you put it in the ground? Like, also paying attention to time and season. So not everything you just do whenever, whatever, like we do now. And so I thought this was pretty genius. And how come we don't learn about this in school, but we learn about the unification of Europe? It's
Mm.
like, okay, I mean, we should learn these things, but why did we not learn about that? And so when the more they talked about it, the more I wanted to taste it. Okay, fine. You made me fall in love. Now, can I meet my lover? Like, please. And, and everybody was like, no, we can't. Like, there's no seed. Nobody has them. You're looking for the dinosaur. Are you crazy? We're just telling you a story from the past. And so I think the idea of the seed library came out of this, that I don't want my food heritage, my whole history to be history. I wanted for it to be a living culture, just the way I ate those pomegranates. I wanted future generations to also, and myself, to taste our history again and to make it part of our bodies again, and for it to be part of our living history, living right now, like not something that we can talk about like a past story. And so in the process, I was looking for these seeds. I found some. We've been working to grow them again and to bring it back to people's kitchens and under their beds. But also, yeah, from that developed kind of more and more of finding stories and finding more varieties, and just like at that time I was posting about them on social media because I was just excited. I had you know, I had just come back from dropping out of my PhD program and trying to figure out what to do, taking side jobs here and there and posting about the seeds, right? And
Hmm.
all of a sudden, you know, I, of course, discovered I'm not the only one who's longing for this. And also, a lot of people were curious, and a lot of people were starting to remember their own stories and their own traditions from different microclimates, from different villages. And so it's kind of the seeds sort of uh, saved me or chose me rather than I saved them. People often say, "Oh, you save seeds," and I really find this not true, because I feel like they found me. And if you really think about it, they have such powerful energy. They are life, you know. They hold in them so much life, and so um, yeah, that's how it started, and now it's kind of our seeds have developed wings, and they are now flying all over the world, and um, yeah, and hopefully telling stories and feeding people.
Wow, that is so beautiful. Oh, there's so much I want to pick up on, but I have to know, did like how good was the watermelon? I know it's not like a real question, but I guess you got to try it? I'm assuming.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
real question though, because we are still in the process of breeding it back into its original form as much as possible,
Right.
because soil has changed so much, and that was part of its loss, because of the introduction of agribusiness, the introduction of hybrid seeds. Israel is big on like agri industry, so since the Zionist movement, there was a move towards quote unquote modernizing the Palestinian farmer, introducing all kinds of chemical inputs into the farms, and of course hybrid seeds and new kinds of seeds, and for sure that has changed a lot the soil and the seeds. So and actually, if people want to be part of this breeding project, they should contact us, because it's now happening everywhere, that we have folks uh, growing it and trying to figure out like how to get it back to its most original form as much as that's possible. Which, and so it's no surprise that it did the best in the north, where it comes from,
Hmm.
because as we say in Palestine, the seed knows the soil. So even though they've been separated for a long time, they kind of recognized each other, you know, in this
Definitely.
reunion. So so it tastes nice. It's just not as sweet and magnificent as I heard about it. But it's possible that I also like had such a build up about it. But I think it's definitely that the seed has changed and we need to do a lot more work.
Yeah, I hear that. Well, who knows? Maybe, you can send some seeds up here and we could try it at the farm that I'm at. I'm definitely open to that collaboration.
Oh, okay. Well, we are looking for someone willing and able to grow some heirloom cabbage that's a threatened variety.
Okay.
And we need people in cooler areas. So if you're interested,
Yeah,
but it it overwinters and stuff, so it's a 2-year commitment, and we can't find a lot of people who are willing to do that. So if you're down, call us.
yes, we'll keep in touch. I love it.
Okay.
I love it. Um, there's lots that you said there, and honestly, a lot of your story really resonates with me. And if I could just share for a little bit, Um, I just said like my part of my family's from Jamaica, the other part is from Portugal. But I'm a person of the diaspora, and I was born and raised in Toronto. And food to me has always been that thing that connects me to the sense of belonging from like these cultures that I know I'm a part of, but I don't often feel a part of. And some of my earliest memories are of actually being in the garden with my grandmother, growing like tomatoes and cucumbers and all these different things. Fast forward to me being a little bit older, I had again this deep realization of not feeling connected, and food was always that piece of the puzzle. So when I turned to my dad in particular, who's Jamaican, and was like, you know what, I think I'm going to start farming. It's nothing serious, just like some urban farming, just to keep my hands in the soil and specifically grow culturally appropriate crops. He looked at me like I was wild, and I recognize like on a really deep level, there's still a lot of stigma attached to working on the land, specifically as Black and Caribbean folks, just due to being forced to that for hundreds of years. But it really gave me a sense of connection, to lands, to food, and really to myself. So there's something there that you said that like prompted even my own memories of being young and being outside. And it's funny also this nature piece you brought up around like nature camp for kids. I was having this conversation recently with some friends about being so grateful to my mother, who at a really young age took my brother and I camping with her and just started fostering this relationship with nature. And like I grew up just, I was always a tech kid. I was always inside doing my thing, but I really looked forward to being outside and looking forward to those camping trips. And to this day, like I book camping trips throughout the summer and whatnot. Because I recognize that like we are nature, and some people might look at me sideways when I say that, but like we really are. And I try to have these kind of conversations with my younger siblings and my younger cousins, and they think I'm like the nature guy. Like whenever I see my younger siblings now, they're like, "Are you still a nature guy? Like, do you still like hanging out beside the trees?" As if that's like a wild thing to do. Um, but I love to do that, and I'm noticing there's an even greater disconnect and separation happening specifically for younger folks, and even people my age and older, like really anybody, that like we feel like this like nature is sort of beneath us. And I feel like there's something there about trying to sort of reconnect us to nature and sort of amend that relationship, because it's deeply important, not just for the planet but for our well-being, for our communities, really for life. But yeah, there was a lot there that you just said. It made me think about all those things.
Yeah, well, yeah, thank you for sharing. And it's really beautiful to obviously hear that. I mean, I have, anyone who knows me knows I have a very soft spot for
Mm,
Jamaica. And, well, particularly like, I mean, the whole Caribbean. But yeah, I mean, when you go to Jamaica, it's such a beautiful, fertile place. Like, it's so mind blowing that we should have people in an island like that going hungry. Like that should tell us about what's
right.
wrong with our world. And then, when you really think about it, what's happening is like literally Jamaican soil, literal soil, is being taken out to build these resorts for people who are disassociated from nature
Hmm.
and want to go and have a sanitized, quote unquote,
Hmm.
natural experience. And uh, and it's sold to, like, China is buying Jamaican topsoil. You see signs, topsoil for sale. And so, what does that mean when we're actually selling our soil? And it's not because Jamaicans don't
Mm-hmm.
love their soil, but they are like most countries around the world, most peoples around the world, um, are being severed by this capitalist system from their nature. They're also their way of life, their foodways. Um, and so I think you also brought up in what you shared about this idea of, oh, are you still the nature guy? And that we are nature. Well, definitely we are nature, because what else are we? If you think of our function, it's not very different than a seed and a tree. It's like we are seeds, and uh, we need to have very specific climate to
Right.
grow inside our mothers and then become uh, living humans who then continue to interact with other living beings. Um, but I actually been thinking a lot recently about what that means, because in today's world, I'm starting to think that we're not only nature. Like, it seems that we are moving towards what feels to me like a hybrid human existence,
Hmm.
because we're so attached to our technology that it's hard to like, do you distinguish yourself from your phone? Like,
Right.
are we still human? Like, are we still human? And I think this is a real question as we also explore ourselves as a species in these really dire times of both, like, so much insane murder and torture and and also, like, in this constant hospicing. Like, our whole planet is in hospice, and we walk around as if we're not part of that or something. And so I think, I don't know, I always think about how we're in this kind of transitional moment, and who we want to be, and what we choose, what seed we choose to plant in the
Mm.
metaphoric as well as the literal,
Mm-hmm.
will decide what kind of design we have for the future. And maybe some of us will move into massive hybrid human existence, and some will be dinosaurs, like, in
Right.
the sense that I feel like a dinosaur. I feel like a dinosaur every day, um, because of, like, how I have a resistance to a lot of technology, even though I use it. And we're talking through technology right now. I'm resentful. I haven't yet embraced it. So what's going to happen to people like me who still like to write with paper and pen? I
Mm.
mean, maybe I'm rigid too. Like, maybe there is a way that we move forward more consciously into whatever we're becoming. Like,
Right.
that's the natural evolution of things, or not natural, whatever. That's how things. But if we are part of this uh, flow, whether we like it or not, how do we kind of take a pause, and even though it hurts, figure out, well, okay, this is happening. What are we gonna choose right here, right now? I
Right.
think that applies to everything from what we eat to how we eat and who we eat with.
Absolutely. And my mind is going 100 miles an hour thinking about like all the connections there. Specifically, like I think you touched on this idea of a sort of I've heard it put in this word of like hyper reality, of like sort of being enabled to like distinguish reality from like simulation reality. And I think the best example is like social media, for example. Not trying to bash social media. I could do that all day long, but just as an example, I think that, yeah, a lot of us might feel our self-worth or like feel that that is a part of us, rather than like just turning that thing off and realizing that that's like not a real reality. And I'm also constantly rejecting that this reality that we know it today, with climate change and capitalism and militarism, like all of these different systems working together, like this doesn't have to be our reality. And I'm much more interested in dreaming and contributing to creating an alternative that is like founded in love and care, and justice. But that's not an easy thing to tell people who are in the grind, as we all are, just trying to make ends meet and making sure that we have food on the table for our families, etc. It's not easy. And sometimes I'll speak for myself, like I feel like a dinosaur. Like you just said, I think that was the best way to put it, because I'm sitting here being like, things don't have to be this way, and we're just sort of one way or another agreeing that it is, but it doesn't. And like, how can we go back to, I don't know if it's go back, but like, how can we create something that's better? And I know technology can play a role in that. And I've seen examples of like solar punk worlds, or like these other ideas where technology is not being used to do what it's doing to us currently. But who knows if the powers that will let that happen or not.
Well, the thing is, you don't have to worry about it in a way, meaning not that we don't have to worry about it, but meaning that a change is happening whether we like it
Right.
or not. Like,
Right.
climate change is real. Like, we
Mm.
are flooding, we are drowning, we are experiencing, we're burning also, like, so it's not something that, oh, whether we like it or not, do we want to change or not, whether we want to or not. The truth is, like, most of us, including, I'd like to say ourselves, like, we put our head in the sand because, oh, for now I can breathe. But
Mm.
there was a time in the summer, and you're in Canada, we couldn't breathe.
Right.
We couldn't. And uh, and why wait? Why wait till something so impossible to survive occurs for us to start actually engaging in real rigorous imagining, real rigorous design, real rigorous conversations about this is happening. And but I think we're too comfortable. Like, not everybody in the world, but
Mm-hmm.
people, a lot of people in especially this empire are too comfortable. So when you're too comfortable, you're not as pressed for solution. There's
Right.
no. But if you talk to people like in the Maldives, I mean, they're pressed for solution. They're drowning. It's important that I don't know. I feel like it's important for us not to wait till it's too late for us to be like, oh, let's think about what we want to do. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and we have science, technology, whatever. We have a lot of things in our hands that can help us forward rather than help us downwards, if you will.
Yep.
But I don't think. I mean, there is movement. I think there is movement, and there are days when I am like, I talk to my students, and I am optimistic because I feel like the new generation is less likely to accept mediocrity,
Right.
and that is something hopeful. But at the same time, there are, as you said, bigger forces. But then, in my own spiritual belief, there are also even bigger forces.
I
So
agree. Yep.
um, maybe it's not as, I don't know. Maybe that's the way I keep myself from collapsing. There are days when I don't feel like getting out of bed, but um, but we have to at least imagine some some threads of some threads we can weave into a new future.
Absolutely. I don't think that could have been said any better. Taking it back to food and seed saving as resistance. And I know I'm involved in a lot of sort of food sovereignty projects and initiatives in the city of Toronto. Um, just also recognizing that land and seeds and food are important, not just for nourishment, but quite literally for life and keeping us connected to each other, and nourishing the soul, kind of per se. And I'm thinking then with the heirloom seed library, what is the significance of the heirloom seeds? And yeah, perhaps you can just speak a bit to that.
Yeah, I mean, I can, and I just want to say that these days, honestly, if I'm being
Hmm.
transparent, it's hard for me to even talk about what that means today in the same way that I maybe would have
Right.
before, because I work in the world of food and seed, and my whole project was all about, making sure we don't go hungry, and that, the seeds that our grandparents gave us and passed down to us are going to be our salvation. um, and that might still be true, but I'm also talking to you while yesterday I was talking to my people in Gaza, and we are running out of seeds, and also the soil has been completely destroyed, that it's so toxic. We cannot bring any seed in. People are literally being starved to death. And so I am I'm conflicted internally, because I'm in so much pain about, like, have we failed? Like, I mean, we've clearly failed. But then someone in the midst of shelling figures out how to write a message to say, I found a handful of seeds with so and so, or, oh, so and so in Khan Yunis has a plot that hasn't been attacked, or, it's just these little spaces of life in the midst of all of this, which is, it's like forcing life despite so much terror. And in, like, you have to figure out how to even have the will to think about that,
Hmm.
you know
Hmm.
when you say heirloom seeds are literally the seeds that have been passed down to us, that we can grow and grow the next year and every generation after generation. That's how, like, for example, you have the heirloom kusa, which is the zucchini that we make stuffed zucchini with, a very famous Palestinian dish. Uh, and every year the seed is passed down, and then the same kusa grows the next year and the next year. And so you keep cooking the same dish every year. But what if this kusa disappears? Like, what do you do? Like, does a now you have to invent the new you, kind of a new variety that will express a new thing. So um so heirloom seeds, in the way I would talk about them today, are really, other than the technical part of, like, how they are, you know, mostly open pollinated, they are seeds that we can reproduce to have the same character as the year before. Farmers can save them and regrow them, blah blah blah, all of that. But today, like, when I think about heirloom seeds, I also think about, well, these are the seeds that are going to have the possibly the only memory of our people, and our ways that are being destroyed. Like, if you're destroying everything, perhaps these heirloom seeds are going to be the carriers of a people who are killed, people who are being exterminated. So it's, I don't know. It's really hard for me to talk about these seeds now in just like the romantic sense, but more of like they are the subversives, and they have to survive for us to survive.
Yeah, exactly. Um, yeah, and I'm just sort of sitting here with a heavy heart because everything you're saying is very striking and very honest. Yeah, and it quite honestly makes my blood boil, and the pit of my stomach is on fire. But I appreciate you sharing all that. I really do.
Thanks. And I actually, if you don't mind, want to say one more thing, which is that we're here in a podcast about food and food justice and food this and food that. And for the majority of the food movement, uh, we feel massively betrayed. Like,
Mm,
where are all these people? I mean, they love to invite me to seed conferences and seed this and seed that. And, oh, let's talk about, they love to talk about, like my friend Rowan White. I'm sure you've heard of her, you know her. She's an indigenous seed saver and grower and a beautiful human and poet, and she always says, they like to talk about us as dead.
mm,
That's when you want to talk about Native American. You don't
right.
want to talk about a living Native American, really. And the same, like, where is this very conscious, awake food movement right now? Silent, complete silence. And so I'm not I am taking note of this, clear note of this,
Hmm.
in the sense that there's all this conversation about our planet, food justice, this and that, and then silence when literally a whole population is being intentionally starved to death. A population that has held a massive amount of the agrobiodiversity they keep harping about. So there's a lot of injustice within the food justice movement. It's not just. And I think it's time that we actually talk about this more openly, because there's a lot of like sweetness that's fake about how we talk about, oh, we all care about the planet. Let's get together and have these little community farms. Oh, but wait, uh, don't talk about certain things, and oh no, this is not political like this.
Mm,
When actually the history of agriculture in North America is full of blood.
ex-
If you eat here, you're eating blood. I'm sorry, like, this is a conversation we have to have. Like, I'm here in upstate New York. Every time I walk, I feel it in my body. Like, this place was full of
right.
plantations, but also before that, also people, Mohawks who loved this land. They just loved this land. They know this river. But they were made refugees, not once, twice, and ongoing. So I don't know. Like, I really would hate to be on a food podcast and not talk about these things, because I don't want to be polite, and I don't think polite is what I expect of people who really, um, your blood should be boiling. My blood is boiling, and not just for Palestine, by the
Hmm.
way. I mean, look at like Sudan. Like, Sudan is like a cradle of so much biodiversity. So much. I mean, it's being destroyed under our watch. Who are the beneficiaries? Who are the beneficiaries of all this destruction? Be it in the destruction of Congo, the destruction of Jamaica, the destruction of Haiti, the destruction of Palestine.
No, and again, thank you for your honesty. And yeah, please let it rip. Like we can, we could talk all about that, honestly. and I think this is a common theme that I've seen in the food world and other sort of like social justice movements kind of thing, is like it's a performance, right? Like everyone wants to talk the talk but not really walk the walk. And I know at FoodShare we try our best. Of course, we can only do so much, but yeah, it's it's a lot, and I'm sort of at a loss for words because it forces you to be super reflective on where we're at and how we benefit from this land. That is completely stolen. Like all of Turtle Island is stolen, and is constantly being extracted from and reaped for the benefits of the wealthy, the 1%, whomever you want to call it. But that's really part of the settler colonial projects. And we're seeing this happen, as you just made example, like not only Palestine, but in parts of the African continent and the Caribbean and continuously across these lands. Um, it's yeah, it's wicked and quite abhorrent, if I can call it that.
Again, if you're not hungry and you're eating well, you don't care.
Right.
And that's the sad part, because it's a failure to see your connectedness, and that's where I also
Right.
say it's a hybrid human existence, because you cannot be one with nature if you cannot be generous. It's an oxymoron. Like, you can't. Nature in itself, with its wrath and when it's with its nurture, it is generous. I mean, agriculture in its
Mm,
foundation, one could say, is violent, because nature always provided, and we just decided uh, we want more and we want to dig more. And I mean, this is a question, but it continues today. Like, why? And actually, the people who are quote unquote not hungry, they're also getting
mm,
more sick. It's important to know, like, that they're also living the illusion.
right.
I mean, in the end, maybe they'll go to the moon and have whatever, but in the end, I mean, we are, I think most people love the ocean, for example. Everybody likes to go to the ocean. But the ocean is going to start to show us some things we don't like.
Hmm. And there's something there like about, and I'm glad that you call it like this hybrid human, because it really puts things into perspective. And I had a conversation on the podcast a few episodes ago now about what happens sort of when we lose connection to one another. And the context was, there was this podcast and this person was talking about how humans will always choose convenience over loyalty or over connection. And we're seeing it today. Like you can get all your food delivered to your door and all your groceries, everything you need without interacting with a human. But what does that do then to that person, to that community, to that society, when like we are detaching ourselves from one another, but also are sort of rejecting this idea of like interconnectedness of nature, of food, and the non-human beings, the animals, the plants, like everything. Um, and I think we're sort of seeing that unfold today with how we I don't want to speak for everybody, but I've noticed that a lot of us are just in our silos and we're like only thinking about me and mine and not worrying about the folks around us. I think about this daily, considering that I live in a condo and I still don't really know my neighbors, and I keep having ideas of like trying to get something growing so I can form a better community and connection. Um, but it's quite terrifying, and honestly, it's concerning. Um, just trying to think into the future, and yeah, just kind of seeing where this thing will go.
But I like to just maybe conclude to your
Hmm.
point. I disagree with your friend. I don't think that humans will always choose convenience over loyalty. I think we are capable of choosing courage, and many of us try our best and have. And I'm not even talking about us sitting in our comfortable homes. I'm talking about farmers today all over the world who are still choosing at the risk of their own lives, including those people in Gaza I'm telling you about, who are choosing to put seed in the ground, even when literally their life is on the line for it. So
Right.
I'm not sure that humans will always choose convenience. I have seen humans choose a lot of bravery and a lot of loyalty, and they may not have always been appreciated and may have not always been talked about in all of the history books, mostly written by conquerors. But they exist, and they exist today, from revolutionaries in Haiti that decided they will not be enslaved anymore to folks in every single corner of the world who are not choosing mediocrity and they're not choosing convenience.
Right.
And that is really our only hope.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I really could not. Um, well, I'm thinking that we've been in here for almost an hour now, and it's wild how time flies when you're just in the flow of things. But I just want to acknowledge the moment that we're in. And I know there are daily developments of what is happening in Palestine. Um, and I know that, yeah, there's a lot going on in the political sense, a lot of talk per se. But I kind of want to give you the floor to sort of maybe share and maybe look into the future, um, thinking about some of the things we just talked about and perhaps centering it on liberation and solidarity. Um, Anything you'd like to share? Because I'm sort of at a loss for words, to be honest with you.
Well, I don't know what to say other than it means a lot to me that we are in this conversation. Um, of course, I'm in deep grief. My heart is massively broken. And I know that I'm not by myself. And of course, it's very personal to me because of who I am and being Palestinian. But I think a lot of people are in grief with me and um, with us. And I think because maybe, and I don't know, but it feels like this moment is calling us to deeper existential questions. Sadly, it's come at the cost of so many lives that continues, and the torture of people. Um, and I obviously don't know the future, and and sometimes the pain kind of overshadows any thoughts of anything hopeful. Like I wake up and I first can't believe, why am I waking up in my bed still alive while my people are, many of them are not.
Mm,
Um, and I look at the news and I wish for something, a miracle, and that maybe my feed today will not hold so much tragedy. Maybe there will be a piece of good news. And it has not come yet, but I want to still, like when we believe in the seed, even as it goes in the dark underground, that maybe one day we will experience this miracle. And that I pray, really, my prayer is that we will never become like those who are now killing us and torturing us. And that our
mm,
true victory will be if we and when we survive. and we don't become like our oppressor. And I think that would be the greatest gift Palestine can give the world too. Um, Hopefully, can we break the cycle of oppressed being oppressor and vice versa? And I
Mm.
know some folks might say this is an early conversation, but I think this is an important conversation because what this moment is calling us, whether from climate change to genocides, it's calling us to ask the deep question, the real question: who do we want to be? Who do we want to be in this moment and moving forward?
That was perfectly said. Thank you, Vivien, so much.
Thank you.
I really appreciated this conversation, and I hope viewers will too. I think it draws so many lines, talking about the great stuff and the not so great stuff. And I think also, you know, bringing those, just sort of understanding the settler colonial project may look different in different places, but it's an ongoing thing. And folks understand that this is happening here too. I don't want to go off. Like, I think what you just said was perfect, but I have something written here that I thought was so beautiful, and you can feel free to speak to it. But while I was looking up some of your work before we ended up having a conversation, I think I heard this or I read it somewhere, and I don't know if you said it or you're quoting someone, but it was like a paraphrase of like, the belly is a garden.
Oh yes,
Uh,
that's me.
that's you. Okay, I don't know. This has just stuck with me. It's stuck with me over the past few weeks. I only have that portion, so I don't know if it belongs to like a larger
Yeah,
context or
it
a bigger
does.
piece.
It does. And
Okay.
actually, thank you. You read my mind through the ether.
Okay.
Because when I said to you, thank you because we're here together having this conversation, I was thinking a lot about that. And
Mm,
that is actually the name of a, a performance I did at Bard College, but it's also the name of the course I teach at Bard College. And it comes from the Palestinian saying البطن bustan, and it's a saying that we use when we see like two brothers and they look very different but they're from the same mother.
mm,
um, and they say, oh, we're brothers, and you go like, what, you're brothers? You know, you have green eyes, the other person is just brown eyes, whatever. And then, you know, people say, oh, well, البطن bustan, the belly is a garden, meaning that the mother, it's the same belly, and it
mm,
produces and gives life to a whole array, like what can happen in the nature of our womb is diverse, and it doesn't negate the other. And so when I say, like, I emphasize it, and when I say thank you for us being here together, because it is a reminder just for us being and talking about this, that we are kin, and we
mm,
are children of the same mother, and we might be different in many ways, but we don't negate each other. We don't have to. We can actually be a good thing for each other,
mm,
and we can live at the same time in our difference in the same space. And that's really what this saying is about. And I think, again, even linguistically, as an indigenous culture, we knew that. That's why we say البطن bustan, the belly is a garden.
oh, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing more about that. And yeah, I'll definitely be carrying that into the future with me. And I think it's also important that we continue having these conversations, especially the hard parts, as you emphasized.
Thank you.
Of course, of course. Well, yes, that is the end of our discussion today. But if folks want to follow and support your work, Vivien, where can they do that?
I mean, people can follow me on Instagram, Vivien Sansour. But we are working as the Palestine Heirloom Seed Library on creating a new website. And in my current website right now, viviensansour.com, people can email. There's a place for email, and you can email us at art.and.seeds@gmail.com. And we also are launching what we call the Seed Protectors project. And it's a project where we're trying to have growers all over Turtle Island growing seeds from Palestine in order to save them and keep them alive. And so if people are interested in becoming growers, if they are interested in learning more about this, contact us or just stay tuned. Hopefully, within the next few months, we'll be having more presence online after we've done the work on the ground more. So that's it in a nutshell. And just keep growing, whether it's the Palestine Heirloom Seed Library or not. Just look in your local community and be a good seed.
Exactly. I know I'll definitely keep in touch regarding that cabbage. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
Here's something good that came out of this podcast for sure already.
We got some tangibles, definitely.
Yeah.
Dignity and Joy is a podcast from FoodShare Toronto. We're a food justice organization advocating for the right to food and working to challenge the systemic barriers that keep people from accessing the food they need to thrive. You can learn more about our work at foodshare.net. If you have feedback on the pod, we'd love to hear from you. You can send us an email at info@foodshare.net or on our social media. We're at FoodShareTO on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. Dignity and Joy is produced in collaboration with Lead Podcasting, with sound engineering and editing by Mara Tizak. The production team at FoodShare is Renee D'Souza and Andrew Thompson. Special thanks to Amanda Cupido. Thank you so much for listening.